So we are excited to have Dr. Vallabh Janardhan. He's the co-founder and chief medical officer of Insera Therapeutics. He is going to talk about, how can you take an idea from the napkin to the bedside. Dr. Janardhan, as I told you, he's a co-founder and chief medical officer. He's also the co-inventor of Insera's portfolio of medical devices for the prevention and treatment of acute ischemic stroke, hemorrhagic stroke, brain aneurysms, and peripheral vascular disease. He's a trained stroke and interventional neurologist. Prior to his current role in Insera, he developed the Texas Stroke Institute. It's now part of Hospital Corporation of America, the first health system to have a multi-hub and spoke system of brain attack care in the US. He completed his vascular and critical care neurology fellowship at Mass General from Harvard Medical School and his interventional radiology fellowship, neuroradiology fellowship at University Hospital of Cornell in Columbia. So welcome, Dr. Janardhan. It's all yours now.
Thanks so much, Dr. Chetupalli and Dr. Agrawal. It's truly a pleasure to be on this platform. I really feel this is something that's so important for our medical healthcare and physician community, because there's a social obligation for all of us who have gone through the entrepreneurial journey to share openly with colleagues as well as physicians and our entire ecosystem, so that newer and newer innovations and technologies can help patients in the years to come. So in that spirit, I was very excited to be part of this forum. I was listening to a lot of the comments and introductions from a lot of the people in the audience and panelists. So thanks everyone for taking the time, and a big shout out to Ruchi for putting all of this together. And I'm very excited to share how do you take an idea from a napkin sketch when you have an aha moment all the way to the patient's bedside, and what are those processes, and how does that journey look like? And I want to kind of share that openly with some examples of the Insera journey in that process. So good evening to everyone. Good morning to those that are in different parts of the world, and very excited to share our journey. So as mentioned, I'm a stroke and neuroendovascular surgeon. I'm trained in catheter-based techniques to be able to treat blood vessel problems from the head down to the toes, and I have a special passion for stroke as well as blood clots all over the body. Helps co-found Insera Therapeutics. We're a digital healthcare company pioneering the use of precision medicine for time-sensitive vascular diseases. As you know, brain attacks and heart attacks and pulmonary embolism form a major part of morbidity and mortality worldwide. And we're not a conventional company, we're Insera, and I want to share our journey with all of you. Our mission was founded with the principle of fundamentally reshaping how we take care of stroke patients and patients with blood clots worldwide. I built one of the largest health systems, multi-hub and spoke network in North Texas, with around 160 freestanding EDs and acute care facilities. Virtually launched every device from every company that was FDA approved, trained a generation of leaders, and also saw at 2 o'clock in the morning in the angiography suite what worked and what did not work, and really needed to kind of move from early generation technologies to what is in the future. So how do you take an idea from a napkin sketch all the way to the patient's bedside? As I talk through my keynote, we're going to talk about our journey our product or our solution is a digital aspiration system. It's a smart vacuum aspiration system that helps with suction of blood clots, as well as is a completely digital framework from the ground up. Before I get into how do you go about transforming an idea from a napkin sketch all the way to the patient's bedside, I just want to take a pause and share our story. So this was several years ago, and discoveries are truly what I feel are observations in our real life. And I was drinking some coconut water with a straw, and a piece of coconut kernel got stuck in the straw. And I was trying to drink the coconut water, and I could not do it as I was trying to use continuous suction in my straw. And then when I started pulsating it with intermittent and cyclical suction, I was able to remove the kernel and drink the coconut water. So this was an aha moment for me as an interventionalist, and it just happened in an evening where I wasn't looking to invent anything, and I called my brother, who's an engineer and a business person. He's trained at Harvard and Wharton, and I said, I think I just stumbled on something over here. And the same principle of a straw to remove coconut water and the kernel is what we try to do with catheters with blood clots all over the body, whether it's a brain attack in the brain or a blood clot superimposed on an atherosclerotic plaque in a heart attack, or a blood clot in the lung blood vessels called a pulmonary embolism, or blood clot in the leg arteries, limb ischemia, or veins, DVTs, and so on. So he just said, you know, I don't know if this is real, and let's just think about it. And then a few days later, this happened. What you see in front of you is my nephew and niece trying to have some use a straw and enjoying themselves. And he noticed what they were doing intuitively. And shortly after, he called me saying, I think I understand what you're trying to say with regard to suction. And shortly after that, cyclical aspiration was born. Subsequently, and so this is how discoveries happen. And subsequently, I observed my little son, and you see a picture of him, and it's his birthday today. So it's my my wishes for him. But he also made me observe what he was doing when he had a strawberry milkshake. And what I realized is discoveries and aha moments happen right in front of our eyes. And it's important to kind of keep an eye open for what is happening around you and see how there are parallels between what you observe and what verticals and what domains you can kind of use those observations in. And this is what led us to develop cyclical aspiration for blood clots in the brain, for strokes or pulmonary emboli in the heart, in the lungs, and the rest of the body. Now, is innovation a spark or is it a process? This is an important message to us, because we always think that innovation is just a one-time moment. But in our opinion, innovation was both. It was a spark plus a process. So for those in the audience who have either started a company, have an idea, want to kind of innovate, always remember that there are two components. There's a spark and there's a process. And in this talk, I want to be able to share the process. And I just shared with you where the spark started. Now, as you leverage your spark of an idea, you need to put it through a rigorous process so that you actually take it to end where he, which is on the patient's bedside. And if I broadly had to summarize this, I would say there is an idea phase, there's a research phase, there's a planning phase, there's a prototyping phase, and there's a launch phase. And many of you who have already done various forays in entrepreneurship will understand different aspects of this, but wanted to summarize this. I think the first thing that you need to do is you need to understand the competitive landscape. What are you dealing with in your competitive landscape? Or if it's software, what is it that is in your competitive landscape, like the speakers that you heard before? In this particular situation, it is vacuum aspiration to remove blood clots. And so needed to understand what is it that's out there. And so what you see here is a lot of analog vacuum pumps that do uniform vacuum suction. Then you need to understand what are the current industry trends. So before you jump into making your idea into a product, you need to understand where are the industry trends going, because this is very important for you to project where you will be in 5 years or 10 years, because it's not as if you have an idea today and you have a product tomorrow. So you need to think medium to long term. And this is an example of extensive research with physician surveys as well as Wall Street analysts, wherein over the last 5 years in the field of brain attacks or stroke, there are two broad categories of therapies to remove blood clots. One is to be able to take a stent, like in heart attack care in the late 80s, early 90s, but a stent attached to a wire. It's called a retrievable stent. So you deploy it in a blood vessel where there's a clot and you try to retrieve it. These are called retrievable stents or stent retrievers. The second big category is vacuum suction, to be able to pull out blood clots. And what we've seen is that the retrievable stent market is projected to be coming down to around 10% by next year. And the aspiration market is to be used first line is growing to be close to 60% by next year. And there's a combination use of around 30% that use a combination of the two. So if you look at it, vacuum aspiration for blood clots, and in this situation for stroke, tackles around 90% of blood clots, either directly or in combination. So as you kind of enter a field, you need to understand the industry trends so that you can position yourself for the next 5 to 10 years. In addition, you need to also project on what is the future for the field, not just what is the unmet need right now, but what could the future be. And this is an example wherein there was a recent acquisition of a company, Corindus Vascular Robotics, that was acquired by Siemens Healthineers for a robotic platform, which is sort of like the train tracks, to be able to do coronary angioplasty and stenting in a remote way, so that interventional cardiologists located in a large city could then kind of beam into other locations where they could do these procedures. There's a lot of interest in how this can also help with brain attacks or strokes, with close to 27 million people worldwide with strokes, and close to 800,000 strokes in the United States, ischemic and hemorrhagic, and close to 1 million people in the United States with peripheral thrombus in the artery or vein, including pulmonary emboli. How can you do remote thrombectomy in the future, which is the trains for the train tracks? So when we designed our system, we took into consideration the unmet need right now, but also what the future needs are. And we designed a digital platform. For example, all telephones can make a phone call, and we've had flip phones that can make phone calls, and you also have iPhones and Androids that can make phone calls. And so we designed a digital platform with a motherboard and a computer on the inside, so that it can in the future be able to cater to thrombectomy. And we also need to understand what are the competitive weaknesses that are currently in the market. So there is, for those who don't know, there is an post-marketing surveillance online tool with the FDA. It's called the MOD database, and you can just go in there, Google it, and you can type in whatever device or company you want to search, and you will get a set of hits on the post-marketing surveillance that exists on those products, and you can understand what are the challenges that end users are facing in the United States, and there are similar databases worldwide. So we analyzed a lot of this, and one example of this challenge was that vacuum aspiration systems that are analog systems are limited by the altitude in which you are using it. For example, the maximum suction that you can provide in sea level at atmospheric pressure is around -29 inches of mercury, which is around -98.2 kilopascals in SI units. And so if you were to go to a higher elevation, what will happen is that an analog dial, which most of the existing systems have, will get frame shifted for the weight of the column to account for the height. So instead of showing -29 inches of mercury, it will actually show a much lesser amount on the gauge. So for example, for different altitude levels, it will show a maximum of the suction pressures that are suboptimal. For example, in an elevation of around 8,000 feet, you will have around a -7 frame shift, and your dial on the vacuum pump will only show -22. So the operator may feel like you can only go up to -22 inches of mercury and not -29 inches of mercury, which is closer to pure vacuum. So we built a system understanding the existing weaknesses wherein you can actually adjust for altitude and correct it for the atmospheric pressure and the altitude. So this is one example of how you need to understand the competitive weaknesses before you enter and expand your idea. You also need to take a step forward to protect your intellectual property. On the left is an example of how you can educate yourself on what is a patent. What are the different types of intellectual property in terms of patents, design patents, utility patents, in terms of apparatus patents, method of use patents, method of manufacture patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and so on. There's a long list of intellectual property that you can protect, and so understanding that can help you draft a lot of your patents before you go to your patent attorney, who will help you in crafting the claims, which are the legal claims to protect your invention. For this, I would recommend hiring the best intellectual property attorneys you can find, because how you draft the claims and how you build your intellectual property portfolio is very important. We personally chose one of the top firms in intellectual property worldwide, Kenobi Martins, to do our US and worldwide strategy, and I could not have done a better job in finding the right IP firm. So this is very important for physician entrepreneurs and innovators. Just to give you a snapshot, Insera's IP portfolio, in a short period of time, we were able to build it up. We have 66 awarded, issued, and allowed patents in US and worldwide, 18 patents in flight, and a very strong portfolio worldwide and in the United States. Now, how far can you take your product development on your own? So this is where planning comes in. For example, you may want to put in your personal savings to be able to launch your idea. You may want to reach out to federal grants with the NIH or the National Science Foundation, and they have what are called small business grants. And we personally raised a little less than $1 million just from federal grants, and they are a great way to make in America and build innovation in this country that can be used in the United States and worldwide. And then you can raise a friends and family round of colleagues that you know who understand what you're trying to do and where you want to go. Then what do you do? Then you can continue to take loans of credit if you want. We've not done this, so I don't have personal experience on it. And do crowdfunding. That's an option. Again, I don't have personal knowledge on this. There are startup accelerators that you can go to that can help incubate and help you accelerate your idea. There are local economic development organizations that know the key sources. There are groups like Innovator MD where they're doing amazing work bringing the right ecosystem together, where you may network and make the right connections. We personally went down the friends and family route and the angel investor route. And we're in talks with institutional capital to raise larger capital for our goals. So these are different ways in which you can put gasoline to your idea to be able to take it to the next level. Now, next comes the next stage of prototyping. So this is a busy slide. I won't drag you through all of it, but in a sense, from the time you have an idea, you need to go through a structured pathway in how you develop it into a product, because there are quality issues and regulatory milestones you have to cross. And if you want to get European CE mark approval, and US FDA approval, you need to show a certain level of maturity in your thought process. So for example, you need to go through the various stages of design and development. You need to understand the unmet users' needs. These end up as design inputs, and then you kind of develop that into actual specifications or design outputs, and then you do the verification of that, and then you validate it in vitro and in vivo settings if it's a medical device. And all of this is captured in what's called an ISO 13485 medical device standard. If you are certified with it, then it kind of gives you a quality seal, and we've been ISO 13485 certified. Similarly, you can also look at it from a different simplistic way. If you have an aha moment and you have a napkin sketch, how do you get it to first in human use? You can develop the design drawings, you can do solid modeling, you can then choose your biomaterials, you can do finite element analysis if this is a medical device, you can build your components, you can assemble your supply chain, could do in vitro testing with flow models and bench testing. You can go on to do in vivo testing if needed, and then you're ready for regulatory approval in first in man. Now, switching gears, I have a 12-step summary for how you can succeed as a physician entrepreneur, and some of it is humorous along the way because you have to have fun along this way. So step 0 is you have to have a winning idea, and this is just a funny thing wherein he says, great, thanks to your calendar invention, now I have to think of a New Year's resolution. So you need to think through all the consequences of your invention, because you need to understand the end customer's pain points as well as your stakeholders. So step 1 is you need to capture the idea. Now, when you capture your idea, you need to kind of be able to protect it with an invention scrapbook and understand the unmet need. And that's just a humorous take on the cavemen who developed the wheel. They kind of ran out of grant money after they made a triangular and hemispheric wheel. So you have a unique idea. How do you protect it? So you need to first do a search on the patent websites, on the USPTO, United States Patent Trademark Office, and there are other websites like Delphion, and your patent attorney can also help you to read other patents that are in the competitive landscape. So you do a third-party patent search. You need to know your customer. Who is your customer? And, you know, this is a funny take on this. She invented the parking ticket, but the customer is the one who gets the parking ticket. So you need to understand who your customers are. So you target your company and your business model to that. And so it's important to look at it. Are you going to be selling the device to physicians? Are you going to be selling it to hospital systems? Are you going to be selling it to patients if it's a software, like we've heard some people with direct marketing? This is just an example of how we analyzed our customer trends of shifting towards aspiration, because a lot of our end users wanted, our early career physicians who wanted a simple technique for stroke treatment. It also had lower costs compared to stents, and aspiration also had growing evidence, so it was important to understand. This is an example of what a napkin sketch could be. You could do it yourself on a napkin sketch. You can get design firms to be able to do it. So we visualized ourselves with graphic designers also to be able to see what our end product would look like. You need to get your patent protection. You have to think through a provisional patent versus a full patent, US patent filing versus an 18 months of PCT world filing, and a lot of things you can do by reading yourself and understanding the drawings and the description, and you can get help from the patent attorneys on the claims and the IP strategy. You need to find your component builders, step 6. So this is an example of how you can go to several events. If it's a medical device, there are MDM, medical device manufacturing conferences, where you can go, and close to 400, 500 component manufacturers come, and you kind of understand what is your need, and you make those relationships. This is an example of how we've built relationships over the years with numerous supply chains and component manufacturers. You need to assemble your supply chain, whether it's software or hardware or medical devices. This is just funny to know that you need to know when you're ready to actually trial run your device or your software, and don't rely on your component manufacturers to tell you. You have to take the responsibility of when your car is ready to drive. Step 8, you need to hire the right engineering team. As this cartoon says, if you hire the people who used to make PCs that normally crash, and you have them build planes, then that's what happens in the screen. And you also have to have clear roles and responsibilities. Who is the engineer? Who is the quality person? Who is your design person? Who is your regulatory person? So everybody has clear roles and responsibilities. And don't forget that you're dealing with human beings. So whenever you have an ecosystem that you've built, don't hesitate to reach out to them personally. And this is just an example of how, as co-founders, my co-founder and I have reached out with personalized greetings and thank you notes to our ecosystem to be able to thank them whenever they did some extraordinary work. And it goes a long way to be able to connect to human beings and make them part of the bigger vision of what you want to do. You then try to test your prototype, and you want to be able to do flow model testing, which is simulated lab testing, and you can also do in vivo testing in animal models if needed. Now more and more of the testing can be done in flow models and in vitro models, and minimize animal model testing so that you can be ready for first in human use. And don't forget, step 12, continue to raise more capital. You want smart investors who not only invest, but also can contribute to the growth of the company. And don't be dejected if you meet a smart investor or institutional capital and they don't recognize that you're the golden goose. You just need to know that they see a lot of people, and they may not be tuned sometimes to pick up who is the who has the right idea. So be patient and perseverant. And this is just an example of how we persevered and developed our aspiration system for cyclical aspiration. This is an example of how an idea and a spark looking at a straw sucking out coconut water or juice or milkshake can transform into an actual solution that can aspirate blood clots. And so this is gratifying to see this whole process move along, and this is what is exciting about innovation, is that you can actually contribute to the next generation solutions that can transform healthcare in your lifetime. We also have got lots of awards and recognition, and very humbled by all of these recognitions along the way in our journey, both for the company as well as for various aspects. I was also humbled as a physician entrepreneur to be late last year's Innovation Award to be, along with other physician innovators, in a select panel worldwide. So very humbling for me. Many of them have built large companies, very successful companies, and very honored to share this panel with my mentor. And just wrapping up, this is an example of how we've kind of achieved European regulatory approval in the European Union in multiple countries. And this is just a 15-second video on the whole bench to bedside story that just shows the first ever procedure that was done worldwide in Eastern Europe. A 74-year-old grandmother with a stroke, and we did all the normal imaging that many of you in the audience do on your day-to-day life. We found a blood clot in the brain that needed to be removed. She was paralyzed and could not speak, and decided to take to the angiography suite and found a complete blockage, and decided to use our cyclical aspiration system after approval, and it resulted in a complete reopening of the blood vessels, and she was able to talk, and this was in 6 minutes after the blood clot was removed. This is the blood clot that came out, and that's what it looks like when it comes out, all from the spark of an idea while drinking from a straw. And this resulted in the patient, you recognize a few people over there, and she had a dramatic improvement in her, and she was able to speak and talk and walk within a day. So this is how it's gratifying to be able to, and I'm going to skip a lot of these slides in the interest of time, but we've developed it for stroke, but we can also use it for cervical aspiration, for venous clots, like what for brain bleeds, for intraventricular hemorrhages, for foreign body retrieval, for clots in the legs, for pulmonary embolism, for clots in the arteries, for dialysis grafts that get blocked, and for multiple indications you want to think about how your idea can kind of transform a particular field, not just in a small area, how one single idea looking at a straw can transform this whole space. And in summary, the last slide, I want to give some take-home points for physician entrepreneurs. Commercialization vision requires a lot of commitment. Initially, you can do it part-time, but you need to transition to full-time later on. It's not for the faint-hearted, requires a lot of sacrifice, but you derive a lot of satisfaction from improving patient care. And in the end, it's all worth it. So thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity, and happy to help anyone in this journey, and very appreciative of the organizers of Innovative MD to mature as well as nurture this ecosystem.
Thanks, Vallabh. Great. Because we are kind of blending our networking and the question answer session, what we could do is whoever has a question put in, I'll ask them to unmute themselves, introduce themselves, and ask, kind of follow up on the questions when they ask you. Great presentation, by the way. Sayan Chatterjee, he's asking what challenges you faced while doing clinical trial for this device, especially while approaching to investigator and patients. Sayan, you want to come on the screen and introduce yourself, and maybe Vallabh can start answering the question.
Vallabh, thank you for the presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, so I am basically, I am a clinical trial data manager from India, Kolkata, and I'm working at Tata Translational Cancer Research Center, Tata Medical Center, Kolkata, for oncology studies, various investigator-initiated studies. So I just wanted to know from you that it is a nice prototype that you presented for the stroke, acute stroke patients. So could you please tell me that, like, what are the challenges that you may have faced during the clinical trial of this device? Because it's not easy to approach the investigators and patients and convince them to make them as a trial participant. So could you please tell me that?
Thanks, yeah.
I think it's a great question, and I'll be candid in this Q&A because part of this is a learning process for this ecosystem. I think it's a social obligation for us to share, those of us who've gone through this journey. I would say the first step is you need to not rush into the clinical side. You need to do enough preclinical work so that you make all of the clinical physicians comfortable that you've thought through every aspect in the bench testing, in the flow model testing, in the preclinical testing, that you have looked at every aspect in terms, for example, for us in clot ingestion improvement, clot fragmentation reduction, gentler on the vessels, and so on and so forth. And when you show all of that, it gives the confidence to the end user that this is something that's been very well thought out. The second one you need to know is never approach the clinical end user 1 month before you want to do first in man. So we developed relationships early on with physicians and then kind of help them and key opinion leaders see our journey along the development process. So they were part of the journey. So this was a team effort rather than we develop something and you use it. It's a collaborative team effort. So I would encourage to do more thinking upfront before you get into the clinical side and involve your end users earlier on rather than later in the stage so that this is a team effort and everyone wins in seeing better therapies come out.
We have Derek Banyard. Derek, you asked, what's Insera's approach to regulatory approval through IDE? It sounds like there is a lot of technology in your device with the ability to update the onboard computer in the future. How do software updates handle in the regulatory environment? Are the updates handled with the IoT or have to be updated manually? Vallabh.
So I think our system can be used independently with the hardware alone, and then the software is an add-on optional thing that allows for remote thrombectomy, and they are handled. You have to decide whether what pathway you want to take for regulatory, and it's a different pathway for Europe, different pathway for FDA. There are indications that are different. That depends on whether you want to go for neuro or peripheral, and in peripheral whether you go for the legs or pulmonary VTE. So there are different strategies you need to do in terms of indication for use, in terms of whether you have a predicate device you can compare or whether you want a new claim that you want. There's also whether you want to make cosmetic changes to your software or whether there are true functional impacts of it, and how much safety information you've collected extensively with your preclinical information. So all of this matter in your strategy and in your commercialization strategy, whether you want to rush into the market or whether you want to be thoughtful and make a lasting legacy.
Thank you. So yeah, my question got kind of, I had like 3-part questions, but I dropped out of plastic surgery residency to pursue a medical device company, and right now we are in the process of both pursuing the 510K route as well as the IDE route for specific indications. And so my first question is, was your device that was brought to manufacturing, was that through the 510K or was that through IDE?
So we're not approved in the United States yet. We are approved in Europe with what's called the FDA of Europe, which is called CE mark or Conformité Européenne. And it requires you to be an ISO 13485 certified medical device manufacturer. Layered on that, you get the CE mark approval for the device. So yes, there are different pathways for different geographies. In the future, we will approach United States, and there are different pathways to take.
And your plan for the US would be IDE, I presume?
We have different strategies. Yes, there are different pathways, but depending on what your end goal is. So there are different ways to approach it, depending on the indication that you're going after and the and what your end goal is. So it's a long conversation, maybe offline. You know?
It could be either IDE or the 510K with the clinical trial.
Sure. And then my final question was, you kind of touched on it, but if you're doing just a software update, that requires its own approval. That's through 510K or some other regulatory framework?
It's it's very hard to give any regulatory advice broadly. I think you need to understand your product, understand what is it that you have done so far and what is it that you want to do. So there are so many ways to kind of approach it. I think it's about customizing for your company or your idea what is the right strategy for a regulatory pathway in the United States and outside United States.
Okay.
And I would strongly recommend getting a regulatory consultant or an FDA attorney to kind of help you in understanding that strategy for your particular product. There isn't a one size fits all for everything.
We have Rick Botelho. Are antithrombotic treatments still used acutely? Rick.
Yes, great question, Rick. I think antithrombotic therapies are used, blood thinners are used. In the first 24 hours after a stroke, especially if it's a large vessel occlusion or a medium vessel occlusion, there is a lot of need to open up these blood vessels quickly. Similarly for pulmonary emboli, to open up these blood vessels quickly so you don't have to use thrombolytic therapies that require extensive ICU stay. So mechanical devices have benefit. Similarly in the legs, there was an Attract trial which showed that mechanical devices with thrombolytics were not more beneficial than antithrombotic best medical therapy called the Attract trial, which is why there's a shift towards use of primary mechanical devices and aspiration thrombectomy to remove clots. So it's an exciting phase. You just need to keep a understanding of your domain and your device indication and understand where the field is.
Thanks, Vallabh. So last 10 minutes, I would like to have the attendees, audiences, everyone, they could, if you see there is a button, reactions, you can raise your hands through that or unmute yourself if you want to introduce yourself, if I haven't got a chance to introduce you, or if you want to have a questions or speak to our other attendees, just feel free. It's more like an open platform. But we have all the three startups and Dr. Janardhan, our keynote, also in the meeting. So feel free to ask your question. Yuli, you have any questions?
Sure. One of the thanks, Vallabh. This is a great presentation and an amazing journey that you've shared with us. A lot of lessons to learn and a lot of experience that you have shared with us. So one of the participants asked, can you share, the presentation? So I was going to tell them that, yes, this video will be available for you to view later on. But Dr. Janardhan's email is available, and if you want to contact him and talk with him directly or communicate with him, he has graciously agreed to, help our members, with thinking through things and talking through things. So thank you, Vallabh.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Chettipalli. This is just a great ecosystem that we need to nurture so that our patients have the best therapies coming down the pipeline. And you can connect with me on Twitter at Dr. Janardhan, or email me. I'm happy to kind of guide you in any way possible so that all of you succeed. If all of you succeed, then our patients succeed, and if your patients succeed, then all our family members succeed, because everyone's going to be a patient at some point.
Yes.
Yeah.